Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and today we're going to be talking about the ABC Movie Challenge. So if you're unfamiliar with this, I started this last year where I did a challenge of unwatched films on my shelf. Some of them had been there for months, some of them have been there for years, so I wanted to tackle my collection in a particular way, so I accidentally started watching films with a title starting with the letter A, and then I actually accidentally watched the letter B and then C, and then I'm like, okay, well maybe make this an ABC Movie Challenge where I can watch the whole alphabet, right? And I would pick a title and I would go from there. And that was a lot of fun last year, and I did it this year as well. And I, about a month ago, started the challenge, and I had already watched A through M, so if you're unfamiliar with the titles that I chose for that, there's going to be a link down in the description down below. But this has been a really fun challenge. Today I'm going to be talking about letters N through Z. So now I have the last half of the alphabet, and that was a blast. So we're going to be going through this today and give you my thoughts on what this whole challenge was in these first time watches. So this has been a really great challenge, but let me know before we jump into this, have you been jumping into this ABC Movie Challenge? If so, I would love to know your thoughts down in the comment section down below. All right, so let's start off with the letter N. All right, so for N, I have to wear the Groucho Marx glasses because I watched The Night at the Opera. A Night at the Opera, right? With the Marx Brothers, right? Groucho, Chico, and Harpo are in this one. Just the three of them, actually. And what a fun, zany film. It's really weird wearing this, by the way. But it is also starring Kitty Carlisle and Alan Jones as well in this film. This actually came out in 1935. And yeah, is quite the fun time. I haven't seen a Marx Brother film in probably a couple years, but this one had me like up the wall, especially with Harpo, especially where he was going up and down a curtain, like a theater curtain. That was probably one of the best bits I had seen. And obviously hearing Groucho all the time just say his crazy things is just one of the most fun things to do. So this is really just a great, I have to do this. I have to take it off. But this is a really fun adventure with the Marx Brothers, of course, and this is one from Warner Archive. And I really enjoyed this film. Definitely was something lighter. I wanted to go into the second half of the alphabet with a lighter film. That way I can just ease into it. And yeah, A Night of the Opera is certainly a great time. And I highly recommend it if you are in love with comedies, and especially comedies from the 30s. It's very slapstick and very funny. So Night of the Opera, highly recommend this one. All right, now that we got that Groucho Marx glasses out of the way, let's actually move on to the letter O. And so for O, I actually picked a title from Eureka. So this is a Region B release that I have here, and I believe this is available on other formats. Let me know in the comment if you know what I'm talking about. But I picked Operation Petticoat, which has Cary Grant and Tony Curtis. And yeah, this is about a pink submarine, or at least it becomes a pink submarine later on in the film. But this came out in 1959, so right at the turn of the 50s into the 60s. And this is actually quite a fun adventure of really a submarine crew, where we have Cary Grant, who is the I guess the admiral, right? Let's see, he's an admiral. He's a lieutenant. Right there. He is Lieutenant Commander Matt T. Sherman, who is Grant. And then we get the unethical Lieutenant J.G. Nicholas Holden, who is playing by Tony Curtis, who actually is more or less like a pencil pusher, you know, who hasn't really been out on the seas. And so he's been assigned there because of the tomfoolery that Cary Grant's entire crew keeps, you know, doing on other submarines. So this is like a World War II film. And I love this film because there's a lot of hijinks in it, and there's also a lot of really great one-liners. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the film, there is I guess an island where they pick up a bunch of army nurses and commanders there. And so there's women on the ship now, on the submarine, and that's actually a distraction for all the men crew, of course. And so it's just one of those funny 50s sex comedies, but also like a war drama in some weird way. But it's definitely more of a comedy than anything else. But it's certainly a fun time, and I really had a good time with Operation Petticoat. So definitely recommend checking this one out if you haven't seen it. All right, next we're going to move on to the letter P. And for this one, this probably is the best movie that I had seen out of all of the films that I have seen. So just letting you know, it's in the letter P, right? Okay. And I actually watched the umbrella release of Possession. So Possession, I finally watched. Andrei Zalowski, I probably said that wrong, Isabel Anjani, and Sam Neill. Oh my God. Oh, non Johnny. Wow. I don't really know how to describe the word. It's really, to talk about this film, you have to be in a particular mindset. And also, it is a very difficult film to watch, but at the same time, it is so rewarding because it is so visceral. It is so, it's so dark, and at the same time, it is so bizarre. This came out in 1981, so it's early 80s, and obviously it's before Lynch, but a little bit. And whoa, this movie is just absolutely insane, and Isabel's performance is iconic. And one of those, this is a film that does not leave your mind. It is one that is still in my mind, and I watched it roughly about a month ago, and it definitely still permeates through my mind, and is certainly a movie that I highly recommend you watching if you like those bizarre films, this weird horror, I guess Lovecraftian type of film that also has like some David Lynch elements to it as well. I know the people who have seen this film a million times. I want to say shout out to Sam, film blogger Sam, my friend. He loves this film, was one of his favorites, and I know it's a lot of people's favorites, so I'm really happy that I finally was able to watch this movie, and I'm glad that Umbrella finally put it out, because I know there was an out-of-print version in the US, so this is actually a region B. I didn't mention that, but if you have a region free player and haven't seen Possession, do yourself a favor, get this title from Umbrella and enjoy the ride. And I also love the special features on this because it has a lot of really great special features with the making of Possession, US cut, and then which is actually kind of a very butchered cut. I haven't seen that version yet, but I did watch Repossessed, which is a featurette, A Divided City, a location featurette, The Sounds with composer, Our Friend in the West with the producer, and it has a poster analysis too, which is really interesting because the poster right here is very iconic. So very great release from Umbrella. Love this film. Cannot wait to rewatch it later on in the future. Watch it with some friends, see what they think about it if they've never seen it. Possession, go watch it. All right, moving on to the letter Q. There's not very many films that I haven't seen that have the letter Q with them, but I do have some Hammer films that I haven't seen yet. In fact, I don't know why I chose to go with the second one, but I watched Quatermass 2 instead of the first film, The Quatermass Experiment. I'm still in the middle of my Hammer films. I would love to jump back into that. I think that's going to happen sometime in maybe the late summer, early fall. I think that's when I'm planning on doing it, but obviously I don't want to plan these things out too far in advance. But I'm definitely going to be doing more Hammer on the channel. But I watched Quatermass 2, which has Brian Donlevy again from the first film, has Sidney James, John Logden, Brian Forbes, Vera Day, and William Franklin. And this movie was good. It's a really fun sci-fi film, and it really just it is one of those really great black and white film that a lot of insane things happen with this really bizarre, mysterious town with this rock fragment that, you know, anyone who comes into contact with it, it's definitely not safe. And so it's definitely getting some like boils, but it's also very like it almost feels like a Area 51 film in some instances. It's definitely based on the Quatermass series in the UK, and very excited about that. And yeah, I'm very excited to watch more Hammer films. It's definitely one of the weaker films in the set, but this is just a fun sci-fi, and I had a lot of good times with it regardless. So Quatermass 2, have you seen it? All right, moving on to the letter R. I actually finally watched the Criterion edition of Francis Ford Coppola's Rumblefish. Wow, I really love this film. This was really great. This is my number 896, like I said, from the Criterion collection. This came out in 1983. It's one of the earlier Coppola films, and I really enjoyed this film, like I was saying. I guess it's not one of the earlier ones. I guess it's right in the middle or something like that. Anywho, Matt Dillon's fantastic in this film, and there's a lot of really great performances besides Matt Dillon. Of course, there's Mickey Rourke, who plays his brother, who is his older brother, who is like escaped the life that they lived, the rumbles that they have as, like, you know, street youth, which is what Matt Dillon really is leading the front on, right? He is now the new leader of this group of kids who are getting in fights all the time in rumbles. And then his brother comes back and it kind of gets a little bit more spiritual, and really his brother's just trying to get him out of this situation, right? And but it's a really crazy film. It's a visceral film. It's shot in black and white, and I really love the cinematography and also the score of this film. This is actually just a really well-rounded film, and really great performances all around, and I highly recommend it. One of those bizarre films that almost dips in and out of reality, it kind of feels a little bit like The Last Picture Show in some instances, and that's what I picked up when I saw this film. And so I wonder if there was any influences there whatsoever. So really great film, like I was saying. Highly recommend this film. Diane Lane is also in this movie, so check it out if you haven't seen Rumblefish. It's definitely worth a watch. All right, now we're moving on to the letter S. There was a million films I could have chose, but I finally watched Richard Linklater's A Scanner Darkly. Yes, it starts with an A, but Scanner Darkly, right? But this is a weird, bizarre film, and I actually really enjoyed it. I liked it more than Waking Life. Waking Life seemed a little, lack of a better term, masturbatory, and this film seems a little bit less so. This is based on a Philip K. Dick novel, and is starring Keanu Reeves, Robert Downey Jr., Woody Harrelson, Winona Ryder, and Rory Cochran. Anyway, those films, all these people, it's very Matrix-esque. It definitely feels a very in and out of reality, because it's like all monitoring, right, as you can see from the cover, but you can also see there's a storm in the background. And I shouldn't have said all this stuff. I shouldn't be talking about it. Clearly something's going on. But with this film in particular, I really love the special effects, because you can see this is actually animated in a way that where it is animated over realistic movement. And I actually quite enjoy that. Waking Life had something similar to this film, but I think this is a better version of that. This came out in 2006. It's a little bit more coherent. It's less on the jumping around into silhouettes of just people rambling about whatever philosophy or psychology or thing that they're going on about, which is what Waking Life felt like. But with this one, definitely looking a little bit more at like how much of our life is just being transformed through all of the mediums that we take care of, and it feels really relevant to today, and I really enjoyed that element about it, because this came out in 2006. It's old now. It's about 16 years old, which is crazy to think about, but it's actually not that old, and it's still very relevant. So A Scanner Darkly, I recommend it. All right, so next is the letter T, and actually this was the film that stopped me going through this ABC challenge for a second, because I needed to take the time to watch this movie. And I actually watched it in a couple settings, and I'm talking about Bela Tarr's The Turin Horse, which is actually a little bit based off of the Friedrich Nietzsche real life event that actually happened, where there was a horse, and the person who owned this horse was whipping this horse because it wouldn't move, and Nietzsche actually went up to the horse and like tried to stop this violence from happening. And that event was a catalyst for him to kind of descent into his eventual death, right, where he was getting taken care of by his I think his sister and his sisters and anyway, family. That's what the Nietzsche story is. But this is actually based on those life of those farmers that were involved in this fictional story, right? This actual story, but this is a fictional telling of what would happen to them. And it's very, very apocalyptic. So I actually have not watched much Bela Tarr. In fact, I think this is the first film that I have seen from the director, and I was quite enthralled by it. It is definitely reminiscent of Tarkovsky, of course, and you see a lot of that comparison. But this is a really intense movie. This is a very dark movie from the subject material, but also just what's going on in the plot, right? There's this apocalyptic looming wind that is constant in this film, which I actually really loved. I loved that effect in this movie. It felt very penetrating. It felt very visceral, and you could sense it the entire time, even though they were going through different days in this film, because this film is actually 143 minutes, so it's almost, it's about 2.5 hours long, and you can feel the length, because really, it's daily activity of this farmer and his daughter and what they're going through, and just their daily routine, and just the wind's getting stronger and stronger, and they get some visitors here and there, but it really is beautiful. It's a gorgeous film, and there's another thunder here, so if you hear that, that's what's going on in my neck of the woods. But apparently the storm is here, so the Turin Horse, everyone. All right, now we're going to the letter U, and this is another film that I've had in my collection for some time now, in the Criterion collection. This is from 1952. It is spine number 201. I watched Umberto D from Vittorio De Sica. I probably butchered my Italian, but man, what a wonderful film. But also a very heartbreaking film too, as you can see, with Umberto D, who is our main character, who is a sickly old man who used to work for the government. He's more or less getting kicked out of where he lives with the apartment, and it's just really sad. He really hardly has any friends. The only friend he really has is a maid who actually also works in the housing unit who lives there as well. And as this younger woman who is really taking care of him, he fakes an illness, which eventually does become an illness, and he stays at the hospital where he's trying to earn up some money to eventually pay for his living situation. But him along with his dog, who is a mainstay in the film, are a lot of the emotional pieces in this film. So it's really just him going through this life struggle, and at the same time it's really heartbreaking to watch, but also there's some comical moments. It's very neo-realist, and it's one of those masterpieces from Vittorio De Sica. And I really, really enjoy this film, and the ending you will not forget. It is one of those films, very much like Akiru in some ways, where the older you get, the less people care about you in some instances. And so I sense that a little bit with this film. But it's an incredible film. It's a very moving film, and I highly recommend it. So Umberto D. All right, next we're gonna move on to the letter V. I hope there's no more storming here going on, because another sci-fi weird movie. I have Vanilla Sky right here with Tom Cruise and Penelope Cruz. And this is actually from Paramount Presents, and this is Spy Number 27. Really great release actually from them. That's the old poster I remember from back in the day. This movie came out in 2001, so quite some time ago now. Not that long ago, but really underrated film that is really just starting to get a lot more praise. I know a lot of people are enjoying this film, but this is my first time seeing it, and I actually really enjoyed it. I liked the first half of the film a little bit more because there was some coherence and some really nice sharp twists and turns, but then it kept going back and forth in time, and it's got this sci-fi concept too, right? It's a romance where Tom Cruise really is kind of a dick. And this entire time he's living this bachelor life, almost like a Bruce Wayne type life, right? Where he's rich and he gets all the ladies, but at the same time he's really just not really sitting with himself until he finds Penelope Cruz, who is brought along as a friend, and falls in love with her, right? And then you know, crazy things happen. He gets in a car accident. His face is covered up. And I'll just go from there because it definitely ends in a very, very crazy way. And you kind of question yourself, how many endings of this film are there? How can you interpret it? So it's a really great film. I definitely recommend it. It's definitely very 2000s. You can sense the soundtrack and the score, which I really liked. I was hit and miss on some of it, but it's certainly a fun time nonetheless. And yeah, Vanilla Sky. Have you seen this one? I didn't until now. All right, now we're to the letter W, and another film that has been on my collection for too long. And this is from Warner Archive. It is Wait Until Dark. Man, what a really great thriller. So this is starring Audrey Hepburn, Alan Arkin, who are our main characters more or less in this film. Also, so is Richard Crenna in this film. This came out in 1967, and this is like I said, a serious film, even though it's got Alan Arkin in it, right? And also Audrey Hepburn, who's more or less in some comedy type films or some romance films that I remember that I've seen. But this is a really great thriller for a lot of really different reasons. And it really is about this woman who is Audrey Hepburn, who's recently blind, and these con artists who take advantage of that and find her pretty much alone in this home where she lives in, where she's watching. And yeah, there are all these people in her life, like Richard Crenna and also Alan Arkin, are posing as different people to kind of just gain the trust of her, to get into a safe and get, you know, some money and try to find a doll that actually has some drugs in it, which you see at the very beginning of the film, hidden. And so that's kind of the premise of it. And the very end of this film is incredible. You can see it on the front cover. She kind of realizes what's going on, and so she knocks out all the lights. And then there are some really terrifying sequences between her and Alan Arkin. There's actually one sequence in particular that, like, I jumped. Like, that was a really great jump scare. So anyway, I don't want to really give too much away if you haven't seen it, but seriously, Wait Until Dark. Great little thriller from the 60s, and I highly recommend it. All right, now we're moving on to another letter that is very hard to find a film for. It's the letter X, and there's a very few films I haven't seen from the letter X, but I decided to choose the Olivia Newton-John musical Xanadu. Xanadu? Yeah, Xanadu. It's definitely Xanadu. They say it a million times in the film. What a weird movie. It's a great musical for the music. The rest of the movie is not very good. Gene Kelly is also in this, of course. This movie came out in 1980, and I'm sure some of you have seen this before, but I certainly have not seen this one. And but I had a really fun time with this. The music, like I was saying, I actually really enjoyed the music. It was actually pretty catchy, and there was some really nice pop music going on in the background. But the story is very convoluted and boring, and The special effects, it reminds me of Tron, even though, fun fact, I haven't seen Tron. Don't tell anybody. But anyway, another thing you can write in the comment section. But Xanadu was a lot of fun, and I definitely had a good time with it, even though I knew it was going to be schlocky, and I knew it was going to be very cheesy, very 80s, very that aesthetic. And so, but I had a really good time, and I'm glad I chose this one because I actually, like I said, I had a surprisingly good time with it. So Xanadu, I'd say recommend it if you want to watch it and have a good time, but otherwise, not a good movie. All right, now we're on to the last two letters. Now we're to the letter Y, and another film that had escaped me for the longest time. This actually came out in 1998 and is actually a remake of another film. It is You've Got Mail. Well, there's a sharp remake of The Shop Around the Corner, right? So I actually also watched that, which I'll talk about in a second. But Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, You've Got Mail. Great 90s kind of comedy, drama, right? That kind of thing, where it really is of a man who is rich and owns this like Barnes & Noble-esque bookstore, the Fox bookstore, Fox and Friends, and Meg Ryan, who owns the children's bookstore, The Shop Around the Corner, right? And they're at butting heads, but they're using AOL chat room at the very beginning of the film because they met each other before the film even discusses them. They met each other online, haven't really known each other, they're very anonymous, and they're sending messages to each other, and it's very loving, and they're starting to get to know each other a little bit more, and it's really very lovely to see that because I'm remembering those AOL chat rooms now, and it just brings me back to dial-up, which is really fun. But also at the same time, they meet each other in real life, and they hate each other, and they can't stand each other, and they don't realize that, you know, they're the ones writing each other these letters on AOL, right? And yeah, I actually had a really good time with this. This is a really fun film. Felt very 90s. I actually really like the soundtrack a lot, and I love the performances. So yeah, You've Got Mail, fantastic time. I don't have the other film in front of me, but I have it somewhere around here. But I also watched The Shop Around the Corner, which is the James Stewart film, and Margaret Sullivan, and I really enjoyed that film too. It's a Christmas movie, or at least it's set around Christmas. It's got a very similar structure, there's similar parts in You've Got Mail. I watched it backwards, of course, but regardless, I had a really good time with it, and I love James Stewart, so don't really have much to say because this is the ABC Movie Challenge. So let's actually move on to the letter Z. All right, last but not least is the letter Z. Another letter like X and Q, where there's not very many films I haven't seen, but I decided to watch the newest, one of the newer A24 films, Zola, or At Zola, right? This is directed by Janica Bravo, starring Taylor Page and Riley Coe. Also has Nicholas Braun and Coleman Domingo. What a nuts movie. This looked very much like Ingrid Goes West. I'm not super into social media, and I don't know how many people who are into social media as much, but this is definitely a film where it felt like a mix between Tangerine, Sean Baker's Tangerine, and then also Ingrid Goes West. So this woman who is played by Riley Coe, who is very white trash, actually just meets her randomly one night and just becomes friends, and then decides to go on this road adventure to make some money because they're strippers. And what happens is this actually goes into a really dark territory where it's like, oh, actually, this is also prostitution. And she's like, I didn't sign up for that. So I guess this was actually a Twitter thread that actually happened, and that's what this is based off of, which is really just nuts. I haven't read into any of that, so I don't really know much about that. But it's crazy to think that there's an adaptation of a Twitter thread, and this is that. And it made it into a film. It came out in 2020, and it is 86 minutes, which is a great amount of time because I don't want to be around these people as much. I love her, of course, Taylor Page's character. She's like the best character in this film, the only one who is kind of sane in some instances. But there's a lot of really crazy things going on, sex, drugs, stripping, all that stuff. So Zola, it's an all right movie. It's definitely not one of my favorites that I had seen in this entire set, but I had a good time nonetheless. So that is my ABC Movie Challenge. I hope I said the right things about some of those films, and I hope you enjoyed the storm around me. I don't know if you even heard it, but thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a like, comment down below, share, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.